Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. So today we are going to start a very important chapter, that is chapter number 16, internal audit. Okay. Now, before I deep dive into the chapter, as usual, any doubts from the previous sessions, any doubt you guys have with respect to any of the topic that we have already discussed in the class? Because see, solving the doubts or asking the doubts is very important. The more you will ask, the more you will understand about the topic. So any doubts till now on whatsoever we have discussed, you can ask in the chat box. You can write your doubts. I can pick it up and then we can discuss that. No? Okay. If no doubts, then let's proceed further. Okay. And discuss and start with chapter number 16, internal audit. See, when I talk about internal audit, as of now, we have discussed about the statutory audit. Okay. We have discussed till now about the statutory audit. But now we are discussing a different type of audit. Okay. Again, this is an audit. That means the concept that you have already understood for the purpose of the statutory audit will apply here also. So this is not something altogether new that will be applicable or that is applicable and you need to understand. No, this is an audit, but this is internal audit. Okay. So when I talk about this audit, the main important part is that it is an audit. So same principles will be applicable that you have discussed for the statutory audit. But now these are to be applied in the context of the internal. That means audit which is done by an insider of company or internal person of the company. Okay, instead of insider, we will use an internal person of a company. Okay, that means now the audit is not being performed by the statutory audit, but the audit is being performed by a person who is an internal person of the company. Now this internal person can be anyone, and we will understand who can be an internal auditor. So my first question, if you have any doubts, you can ask your doubts, and if you can unmute yourself, you can speak. If you cannot unmute, then you can write in the chat box. I will take up your doubts. Okay. So if you have any doubts, just write in the chat box. I will take up the doubt and I will discuss that. Okay. So basically, if I talk about this internal audit, my question to you is, who can be an internal auditor? Who can be an internal auditor? Simple question. Is there any requirement that a person has to be appointed as an internal auditor, should be independent, should be with this qualification, he should be, like having this much experience? What is the requirement for the, person being an internal auditor? Very good. As of now, there is none. As of now, there is none. Okay. The person basically being appointed as an internal auditor, as of now, there is very less criteria prescribed, and we will discuss that also. Okay. What is the criteria that is prescribed? Second question to you guys is whether each and every company is required to appoint internal auditor. Whether each and every company is required to appoint internal auditor. Yes. Some prescribed companies, limited companies. Yes, very good. Now tell me, if some prescribed companies or limited companies are there, in that particular case, which are those companies? Can anyone tell me, like, where the requirement is for these kind of companies? Where can you find the requirement of these kind of companies that, they are required to appoint internal auditor? Where it is written? Section 138 of the Companies Act. Section 138, absolutely correct. Section 138 of the Companies Act. Now, this section provides that classes of the company should appoint the internal auditor as may be prescribed, which is required to be absolutely correct, Manish, which is required to be read with Rule 13 of the Companies Act. Now, let's understand the requirement of the Rule 13. Okay, what Rule 13 says of the Companies Act, and that is required to be read with Section 13. Oh, Section 138. So, Rule 13 of the Companies Act to be read with Section 138. Okay, which says as per the prescribed. Now, what Rule 13 says? Rule 13 says that the following classes of companies shall be required to appoint an internal auditor. Now, this is very important, which may be either an individual, a partnership firm, or a body corporate. So, the structure of the internal auditor is not fixed. An internal auditor can be anyone. He can be an individual, he can be a partnership firm, he can be a body corporate also. Are you getting the point? So, the internal auditor basically can be anyone. Now, which classes of companies are there? So, these are the classes of companies who are required to appoint internal auditor. Okay. These are the classes of company who are required to appoint internal auditor, basically. What is the requirement? Every listed entity. So if a particular company is a listed company, by default, they are required to appoint internal auditor. Okay. So every listed company, number one. Unlisted public company having paid up share capital of 50 crores or more during the preceding financial year. Turnover 200 crores or more during the preceding financial year. Outstanding loans or borrowings. Now, this is very important. Remember, from banks or public financial institutions, not from third parties. Okay, not from third parties, exceeding 100 crores or more at any point in time during the preceding year. Again, so if I talk about paid up share capital, it is a 50 crores. Turnover 200 crores. Borrowings, it is 100 crores. But the important part is at what juncture I am required to calculate this. So at the juncture of preceding financial year, that is closing. That represents that at the closing on 31st March, on closing of that financial year. Okay. But when I talk about at any point of time during the preceding financial year, this part, this is not, I'm talking about at 31st March. That means that at any point in time during the year, if you cross the 100 crore mark, and if you come back, below 100 crore at the during, as on 31st March of the preceding financial year, still this will be applicable. And the last one is that you have outstanding deposits of 25 crores or more at any point in time during the preceding financial year. Again, at any point in time during the preceding financial year. Similar. That means not only at the closing, at every point you need to check and monitor whether you have exceeded this limit or not. Okay. So these 2 points require continuous monitoring or continuous check, I would say. And these 2 points require annual check. Clear? So point number 1 and 2, which is turnover and paid up share capital, requires annual check. Point number 3 and 4 requires continuous check. And that's logical also, because Paid up share capital, once issued, very rare chance that you will, reduce it back unless and until it is not a capital reduction. Turnover, it's a cumulative number. You cannot say that, okay, I have a turnover of 1,000 crores during the year, and then at the end of the year, it became only 500 crores. Unless and until there are major sales return. So turnover is also a cumulative number, which is going to increase. Paid up share capital, once issued, it is going to increase or going to remain same. But when I talk about loans and deposits, these are the numbers which can fluctuate in any direction. That's why you need a continuous monitoring for those. Okay, that is one. Number two, for private companies. Now, this was an unlisted public company. For private companies, there are two criteria: turnover 200 crores or more, and outstanding loans or borrowings. Very important, from banks and public financial institutions, not from third party, exceeding 100 crores or more at any point in time during preceding financial year. Okay, so turnover 200 crores, borrowings 100 crores, but the important part is at what particular juncture I'm required to check: preceding financial year and at any point in time during preceding financial year. To summarize and to give you in a specific way, okay, T50, you can remember this, T200, okay, loans basically 100, L100, and deposit D25. So these are the numbers: P50, T200, L100, D25. And if you see, if I arrange it in a chronological order, you can remember like this: D, P, okay, L, T. That is 25, 50, 100, and this is 200. Like this way: 25, 50, 100, 200. DPLT. Simple. So for unlisted public company, you can remember DPLT. 25, starting from 25, going to the 200. So just double it out: 25, 50, 100, 200. Same for the private companies. There are two conditions: loans and turnover. And here also similar. You can say OT. That is, or LT basically. Which is, again, when I talk about loans, it is 100 and turnover 200. Simple. LT 100, 200. DPLT 25, 50, 100, 200. Easy way to remember to which companies the internal audit is applicable. Any doubt with this? Any doubt? Very good question. Whether NBFC will be included in the public financial institution. So, anyone, what do you think? Should we include NBFC in public financial institution? Yes or no? Should we include NBFC in public financial institution? Yes, no. So basically, again, there are things that we need to see what kind of NBFC it is. Okay. Usually you can say that NBFCs can be included into the public financial institutions, because see, when we were discussing about the definition of the NBFC, we were talking about financial institutions. Yes or no? We were talking about the financial institution. Remember that one of the definition was financial institution. From there, now if I talk about public financial institution, that means whether public is interested in that or not, what kind of NBFC is there, whether it's a kind of NBFC which is governed by, like, let's say for example NHB, National Housing Board, SIDB, NABARD. These are, or there are multiple NBFCs which can be called as the public financial institutions, because they public is largely interested in those particular entities, and they are governed by, having said that, NBFC, they are governed by the different regulators. So yes, you can say that public financial institutions, will cover that kind of. But again, you have to see from case to case basis whether it will be covered or not. One more important part is on this particular definition itself of public financial institutions. Okay. So in Companies Act, okay, there is a definition basically. Okay, there is a definition called 272. Okay, section 272, if I'm not wrong. Okay, what that definition talks about, that definition provides the what is a public financial institution. That definition detail, in a detailed way explains about the public financial institution. And let me present the definition for you guys. This is definition, okay, of which is provided under 272. Now, if you see the definition, what it says, it includes, I'll just zoom in for you. Public financial institution means Life Insurance Corporation of India, Infrastructure Development Finance Company Limited, okay, then a specified company referred in UTI Act, which basically Unit Trust of India Act, institutions notified by the central government under section 2(4)(a) of the Companies Act, old one, okay, then such other institutions as may be notified by the central government in consultation with the RBI, okay, provided that no institution shall be notified unless established or constituted by under any central or state act or any under this act or any previous company law. So it has to be a company only, and not less than 51% of paid up share capital is held and controlled by central government or by any state government or by parties in mix. Okay. So if these criteria are there, then only you can say that this is a public financial institution as per the Companies Act. Will it be an NBFC? If these criteria are there and the 50-50 criteria is being followed, yes, it will be an NBFC. For example, Infrastructure Development Finance Company Limited. Yes, it is an NBFC plus it is a public sector undertaking also. Okay, so you need to understand from that perspective whether the NBFC will fall under this category or not to be classified as a public financial institution. Okay, now let's understand something further here, a very important example. Okay, so there is a very good question that if current year criteria is not achieved, then internal auditor is not required from the next year. Basically, I have to look back in the preceding financial year. Let's say I'm standing today, let's say I'm standing on 1st April 2026. I have to look back on 31st March 2026. The financial year ended on 31st March 2026. I need to see whether the criteria are being met in that financial year or not. If yes, it will be applicable. If no, then in this particular year, the internal audit will not be applicable, or I am not required to appoint an internal auditor. So I have to look back 1 year to see that whether this is applicable or not. Now, basically, once you identify this particular part, okay, once you identify, then you need to comply with it. Let's say, for example, on 1 April 2026, you identify any of the criteria has been met, because the important part is the criteria is or. So you are not required, okay, you are not required to basically, fulfill all the criteria. I need to fulfill any one of the criteria for the unlisted public company or for the private company to, get into the bucket of the internal auditor. That internal audit will be applicable. So if any one of the criteria is also applicable, then the internal audit will be applicable to me. Clear? Any doubt? Yes, the limits are required to be checked every year. So you have to, check every year what was your situation in the preceding financial year. Any doubt? So from 1/4/2027, internal audit is not required. If in the current year, if let's say if I'm there, if in 26/27 all the criteria are not met, not all. See, yeah, means you need to check if all the criteria should not met. Yes. So if all the criteria are not meeting, then in the next year, that is 1/4/2027, the internal audit will not be applicable. So you need to see in the financial year 26/27 whether any of the criteria is being met or not. If not, internal audit. No? Okay. Just for your understanding purpose, okay, is this only part which is there for the internal auditors regulation? Like, is there any other regulation applicable for the internal auditor anywhere else? Standards on internal auditing, very good, yes. Apart from that, apart from that, any other part which is applicable? SEBI regulations, very good. Yes, SEBI regulations. Basically, when I talk about every listed entity, so listed entity, which regulation is applicable? LODR, listing obligation and disclosure requirements, SEBI LODR regulations. SEBI LODR regulations, just for your understanding purpose, there is a detailed section on the internal audit's roles and responsibility. When I talk about roles and responsibilities, there is a reporting, there is a requirement that internal auditor should report to audit committee. How audit committee should review the work of internal auditor and how they both need to coordinate. So audit committee and internal auditor are specified in a detailed way when it comes to the SEBI LODR regulations. Okay. So SEBI LODR regulations again are very important aspect for the listed entities. When we talk about the internal auditor over there, the requirements of the internal auditor are prescribed based on the audit committee. Like, audit committee has to coordinate with the internal auditors and internal auditors will report to the audit committee. Okay. Will report to the audit committee. That is more important. And this is very important point because I will touch up this point when I will discuss a standard on auditing also. Very good. Yes. So there is a standard which we will be discussing in detail, okay, which is applicable to the internal audit or using the work of internal auditor. Over there, this requirement of SEBI LODR for the listed entity, we will see how much relevant it is and how it is, important it is when we are using the work of an internal auditor. Okay, but as of now, just park it, and we will discuss once we will reach on to the, that particular standard. Clear? Okay. So that was the applicability requirement for the internal auditor. Plus, if you see, okay, now this rule specifies that an internal auditor may or may not be an employee of the company. So he can be a third party also. Not necessary he has to be an employee of the company. He can be a third party also. Okay. The term charter accountant, cost accountant shall mean, as the case may be, which are specified, whether engage in practice or not. So not necessary that they are engaged in practice. That means when we talk about internal auditor, can be a charter accountant, can be a cost accountant, whether engaged in practice or not. Okay, whether engaged in the practice or not. And from where this requirement is coming, where it is written, this term charter accountant and term cost accountant. Basically, it is not written in this rule. It is written in section 138. So this requirement is coming from section 138. Let me explain you section 138. Let me add a page. Blank page. Yep. Section 138 says that, okay, from where the rule 13 is coming, that as classes or the classes of company, okay, shall be required to appoint an internal auditor who shall be either a charter accountant, cost accountant, or other such professional as may be decided by the board. So if we are talking about this charter accountant, cost accountant, then they may not be engaged in the practice. So not necessary this has to be, CA in practice. Sorry. So CA in practice or not, both are allowed. And this is coming from rule 13. If you see, this rule 13 says that whether engage in practice or not, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, but the term chartered accountant and cost accountant shall mean a chartered accountant or cost accountant which is specified in the act. Clear? So that is simple rule 13 of Companies Accounts Rule 2014, which talks about the appointment of the internal auditor. Any doubt? Okay, great. If no further doubts, then I have a question for you all guys. Okay. When we talk about appointment of the internal auditor, the moment I identify, let's say a simple example, okay. Let's say on 1/4/2027, okay, ABC Private Limited identified that their turnover is rupees 500 crores for preceding financial year. That is, okay, financial year 26-27. Financial year 26-27. Now the question is, in how much time the internal auditor is required to be appointed? Okay, I identified this, but how much time do I have to appoint the internal auditor? Next day? How much time do we have? Six months from the end of financial year. Okay. Anyone else? How much time do we have? Simple question. 6 months, 6 months, board meeting. Okay. Is there any procedure for the appointment of the internal auditor? Is there any procedure for the appointment of internal auditor? In the board meeting, okay. Anyone else? Not approval of shareholders. Fine. Not approval of shareholders. But if I talk about appointment, do I have 6 months? It is decided by the board. Let me tell you something. First of all, the 6 months is only for the commencement of the act. So this rule, which is there of 6 months, it is commencement of the section that was transitional or provisional, provision in the law. Transitional. That means the moment this rule comes into the place, there is a time given to you to comply with this rule. This is not applicable now. This was a transitional. Okay, transitional rule. Now, coming to the point where if this is not applicable, practically, when we talk about these criteria, turnover and paid up share capital, before the close of the year only, at a lot of times, you will be aware about that this limit has crossed, even when the outstanding loans and deposits are there. So, basically, there is no time limit prescribed in the law. That means as soon as possible, you need to appoint. It can be, if you are aware well before the close of the preceding financial year, then from the start only. Number two, when I talk about appointment, so the audit committee of the company or the board, okay, they have to decide the scope, functioning, periodicity, methodology for conducting the internal audit. And when I talk about listed entity, remember listed entity, okay, over there, it is the responsibility of the it's the responsibility of the audit committee, basically, because internal auditor will report to the audit committee. So internal auditors will be, appointment, removal, and the terms of the remuneration of the internal auditor will be, looked by or will be, considered by the audit committee itself. So audit committee has to review that. As for the listed entities, I'm talking about as per the LODR. So when I talk about LODR, appointment, removal, terms shall be reviewed by the audit committee and then can be approved by the board of directors. But it has to come from the audit committee. This is how actually it works. Okay, because at the end, internal auditor reports to the audit committee only. Periodicity, yes, you can say that, frequency of the audits, like how frequently they will conduct the audit, internal audit of different areas within the company. In case where you have an audit committee will review the terms, but appointment will be done by the board. Unless and until board has not authorized anyone else to carry out the formalities for the appointment. Any other doubts? Any doubts? See, basically, who is the person who has been, has the power for the appointment? Okay, who has the person who has the power for the appointment and for the operations? Now, those charged with governance or the audit committee are not the decision makers. They are there for the governance. They are there for the review. So the appointment will be done by the board of directors, but the audit committee's role is to review, to see the governance. They are charged with the governance rather than the operations. So there is a difference between both of them. Usually, very rare any decisions will be taken by the audit committee. Audit committee reviews and kind of provides a governance overview on the particular company, rather than the decisions, contracts, and everything are undertaken by the board of directors or the person appointed by them. Clear? So again, there is section 179 under the Companies Act, which allows board of directors to delegate their responsibilities to any committee. But again, it will be a responsibility of the board of director only, even though delegated or completed by any other officer. So that will be there. Okay. Now let's go and let's see, further on the internal audit. Now, this was only the appointment, or this was only the applicability of the internal audit. Now, let's understand what internal audit does. What is the role of internal auditor? Can anyone tell me what is the role of internal auditor? What is the working, or you can say what internal auditor is required to do in the organization? Anyone? What internal auditors is required to do in an organization? If I appointed appointed an internal auditor, what he will do? Check the internal control systems. What else? Only internal control systems? Or anything else? Report the deviations to the audit committee? Yes. What else he will do? Internal audit systems, report the deviations. Then what else he will do? Quickly. Anyone? Planning and execution. Planning and execution. See, I'm not talking about the process. We'll not go to the process. I'm talking about what activities he will undertake. Let's talk about the activities that he will undertake as an internal auditor. Quickly, what activities he will undertake as an internal auditor? Basically, the activities that he will undertake is not only restricted to the internal audit. That was old. See, when I talk about internal auditor, old concept means over the time, the concept of the internal audit has evolved. Their areas have expanded. Their, you can say, the scope has evolved much more than it was before when I'm talking about 10 years, 20 years down the line, 20 years before in past. So earlier one can say that internal auditor means internal controls, but now it is not the case. When I talk about internal auditor, monitoring of internal controls is one thing. They are not only responsible for monitoring of internal controls, they are responsible for the financial and operational information and processes also. For example, they will do a process audits also. So there is something called process audit. Control testing, one thing, process audit, another thing, where I go and see the processes are working appropriately or not. Third, review of the operating activities, inventory, fixed asset, operations of the company, how they are happening. Okay, let's say manufacturing, then how the manufacturing is happening. A lot of things are there. Reviewing of the operational activities. Then review of the compliance of the laws and regulations, whether the company is complying with the laws and regulations or not. Then comes the risk management, because if let's say company has a risk, open risk, internal auditor nowadays are also going forward and evaluating the various risks which are applicable to a company. Okay, and on the basis of that, they suggest a suitable mechanism, or they see whether the company has appropriate processes in place to mitigate those risks. Now, can anyone tell me what I meant by the risk management? Anyone? Like, what kind of risk do you see, or you think of when I talk about risk management? Misappropriation of assets. Okay. What else? Anyone? What type of risk I'm talking about? I'll just show you something with respect to risk management and risk uh, governance, something, okay, on one of the company's website. Again, this is for your information purpose, and we will not focus on the name of the company. Okay. See, this is something I'm talking about basically, which is there on your screen. Okay, this is risk and governance part of one particular company, and this is also there in the annual report. I'm just giving you some aspect from the annual report. Okay, risk and governance. So if I want, let me open the annual report. Risk and governance. Okay, here it is, risk and governance. Okay, now when I talk about risk and governance, if you see over here, this is one of the recent areas which has been included for the internal auditors. Okay, or internal auditors are focusing more on this particular area. What is this area? The area is that there is a risk management framework in each and every company. Now, this risk management framework basically talks about managing a lot of risk. Okay, managing a lot of risk, climate related, okay, commodity market price. Now there are responses that the company will frame for these risks. They will bring up some processes. Internal auditor will check whether these processes are good enough to mitigate or to protect the company from these risks. Okay, and again, when you see this mapping, when I talk about this human capital, nature capital, integrated reporting, we will see something in chapter number 18. Okay, integrated reporting, because in front of each and every risk there is an impact on a capital. That is a risk management framework, 6C of the capital. Integrated reporting, chapter number 18, we will see that later on. But right now, see, data privacy risk, health and environment safety risk, okay, financial risk kind of treasury, foreign exchange, liquidity, interest rate, credit risk. Okay, a lot of risks are there. Various type of risks are present. Cyber security, talent and supporting skill. A lot of things are there in a particular company. Now, again, in front of each and every risk, you have a response by the company. Okay. For example, when I talk about foreign exchange risk, so the foreign exchange borrowings are hedged through a combination of natural hedge and market hedge. Now, the internal auditor will go and will see whether this hedging is appropriate, whether this hedging is covering the risk entirely, or there are certain kind of transaction which are still not covered by this hedging. For example, interest rate risk, maintaining an appropriate mix of fixed and floating rate. Liabilities help them minimize the impact of interest rate on the finance cost. Although they are writing it, but internal auditor will go and see how much portion is a fixed loan, how much is the flexible interest rate loan, how much is pegged to the market, which is local or domestic market, how much is the external commercial borrowing, which are which are based on the interest rates across, let's say, US or UK or any other country, and how much will be the impact because of the change on the impact in the interest. Okay, change in the interest rate, how much will be the impact on the financial position, a kind of sensitivity analysis. So all these testings are done by the internal auditor to see that whether the company is, appropriately mitigating those risks or not. Okay. So again, few examples that I'm talking about of the scopes which is there for the internal auditor. And this is nothing but your, okay, monitoring of internal controls, starting, basic one, examination of financial operating informations, review of operating activities, review of compliance with laws, risk management, just now we saw, and the governance, which is ethics and values. So all these areas are there that the internal auditor basically looks for. That's the currently that the, it is there in the portfolio of internal audit. Clear? Any doubt? Now, there are good governance practices and there are corporate governance practices already in the companies. Okay. Basically, if I just show you something, scope is wider than ICAI, checking of internal controls. So it is not something even near to that. There are lot many things which are included in your internal audit. Okay. So when I talk about internal audit, it includes a lot of things. When it comes to the, basically a particular company. And when I talk about listed company, it is more than that. It's more than that. Okay. And basically, let me show you something with respect to more on the internal audit side. Okay. So when I talk about internal audit's function, what internal audit does and what internal audit basically, performs, some glimpse I'll give you. Okay. In the company itself, and we will go back to this particular reporting which is there by a company. We will not focus on the name, but just see over here. This is the annual report, and from the annual report you can get a lot of things. See, reporting of internal audit. Internal audit department of the company co-source with the professional firms of the CAs, report directly to the audit committee. Okay, so here also they have made sure that it reports directly to the audit committee. Plus, there are other things that, which are there with respect to the internal audit. For example, if you see, independent internal audit function providing risk-based assurance across all material areas of the group risk and compliance exposures. So there is a internal audit function who looks after for the risk-based assurance on the all material areas with respect to the compliance, group risk and the compliance, legal compliance, compliance with laws and regulations. They provide the number related aspect that we are talking about. Internal audit function has evolved much more larger way compared to, the traditional internal controls only. That depends upon. So again, what I will say is that when we talk about review of operating activities, okay, now there could be a scenario, there are branches of the internal audit team. Okay, nowadays there are multiple branches of the internal audit team. For example, if I just give you an example, how it works is, if I talk about internal audit, so there is a chief internal auditor who then has, okay, chief IT auditor, chief, or you can say director of the, or chief of the, okay, financial internal auditor, or financial, basically operational auditor, some kind of that. And in some organizations, instead of chief, they used to have a directors. Okay, so they will have a director who will look after for the IT audits. They will have a director who will look after for the, let's say, financial and operational, FNO. We call it FNO audits, financial and operational audits. And there will be another team kind of, who will be a kind of, this is basically in the US kind of companies where there is a SOX also. That's a Sarbanes-Oxley reporting. So there's the director for the SOX reporting. Okay. Nowadays, this IT again has data privacy, okay, normal IT controls or IT operations plus controls, and then they have a cyber security team, cyber audit teams. So this is how the current internal audit function in a, you can say, US listed company is there. So they have a IT auditors, where they have a cyber auditors, they have a data privacy auditors, they have a normal IT control auditors, then they have a FNO who looks after the financial and operational audits, and then you have a SOX perspective because it's a US listed. So they have a SOX reporting directors who are basically looking after for these SOX reporting. So this is how nowadays it is, getting the internal audit function is segregated, and then each of the director will have their own teams of the internal auditors. Basically, this is how it is divided nowadays. Okay, these are certain, again, areas which are covered by the internal audit team. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt till now? I hope you guys are now pretty much well versed with the requirements of the internal audit and some areas of the internal audit, like how internal audit areas are there. If no doubts, can we take up a question? Okay, let's take up a question basically and discuss how this particular area will work. When a particular question is there, how it will work. Let us see a question on this particular part, whatever we have discussed. Okay, let me bring the question. Okay, so the question is, Vayu Aerospace Limited, an unlisted public company, is engaged in the manufacturing of drone components. You are the engagement partner of Messrs. Sky and Associate, the statutory auditor of company for the financial year 23-24. During the audit phase, the chief financial officer of the company presents the financial data pertaining to the preceding financial year. Paid up share capital, turnover, outstanding deposit. Okay. Further, a scrutiny of the loan account revealed that the company has availed a working capital demand loan of 115 crores from a consortium of bank on 10 September 2022. Out of this, 80 crores was repaid on 30th November 2022. As of 31st March 23, the outstanding loan was only 35 crores. Okay. The CFO asserts that the provision of Section 138 of the Companies Act are not applicable to the company because all parameters, share capital, turnover, deposits are below the prescribed limit, and the year-end outstanding loans were well below the 100 crore threshold. So basically, you are required to discuss the applicability of the internal audit in this particular scenario. Okay. So tell me whether the internal audit is applicable or not. Yes, no. Whether the internal audit is applicable or not. Yes, very good. Very good. Okay, so now if we see in this particular case, okay, paid up share capital, let us see. Paid up share capital in this particular case is 45, turnover 180, outstanding deposit 25. What is the limit? DPLT, that is 25, 50, 100, and the turnover 200. Okay. So paid up share capital, P stands for 50, less than 50. Okay. Turnover, less than 200. Deposits, less than 25. But loan as of March was 35 crores. Am I required to check only as of March? Answer is no. We need to see for the loans at any point in time during preceding financial year. So preceding financial year at any point in time. For these two, for loans and deposits. Okay. For loans and deposits, I need to check this at any point. So loan, it was 115 crores on 10 September. Then it was reduced. So they are meeting the criteria, continuous checking for the loans and deposits. As a result, in this particular scenario, the internal audit is applicable. So the CFO's assertion that the parameters are below the prescribed limit is incorrect. I'll show you how to write the answer. Don't worry on that. I'll show you the answer. Clear? Everyone with me on this? Okay, now let us see second part of this question. So second part is that, however, as a contingency plan, the management proposes that if the internal audit provisions are deemed applicable, they will appoint Mr. Raghav as the internal auditor. Mr. Raghav is a full-time employee of the Vayu Aerospace Limited and is a qualified cost accountant but does not hold a certificate of practice. Advise the management on the validity of the proposed appointment of Mr. Raghav as the internal auditor. So what do you think? Can they appoint Mr. Raghav as the internal auditor? Yes or no? But he does not hold a certificate of practice. How they can appoint? Very good. He can or he cannot be an employee. He may or may not be an employee. He can be a CA or CMA, may or may not be in practice. So COP is not required. And if you have to write the answer, basically the answer will be like, first specify the provision. What is there? Section 138, read with rule 13. Specify the requirements of that for the unlisted public company. Do not write for everyone because it is an unlisted public company. You need to make sure that you only write for this one. Some students will go that, it is applicable to every listed, for private limited also. Not required. Write what is relevant. Okay, only specify for the unlisted public company. Do the analysis of the question and give the conclusion. Okay. Similarly, for the second part also, provide the provision, do the analysis and give me the conclusion. That's it. Pretty simple, straightforward. Clear? Any doubt? See, appointment will be from the 1st April 2023, not the time when I cross the mark, because I have to see a year back. So when I will go for the appointment, this particular person will be appointed from 1/4/23. And for that, I will check the requirements of FY 22-23, which is being done in this particular question. Clear? Any doubt till now? Pretty straightforward, nothing difficult. Yes? Okay. Now, we have understood who can be an internal auditor. We have understood basically to whom the internal audit is applicable. So we are pretty much sure and clear on the to whom the internal audit is applicable. We are pretty much sure and clear who can be an internal auditor. Okay. And the scope and the areas of the internal audit. We are clear on that also. But there is something more to this. we need to understand that from where these particular requirements are coming. Okay, that means when I talk about internal auditor, okay, we need to go and perform a deep dive of some of its areas, the function and the scope of the internal auditing in much more detail. Okay, so we have already understood about the areas that it is internal control system, it is compliance with the plans, policies and procedures, organizational structures, goals, objectives, assets, information, utilization of resource. A lot of things are there that we have already understood. Now let's do a deep dive onto these areas. Okay. When I talk about internal control system and procedures, can anyone tell me what internal auditor will review in that? What internal auditor will review in that? Anyone? What internal auditor will review in this? Okay. So effectiveness and efficiency of the internal control system, design operative effectiveness, internal control environment. Yes, very good. So when I talk about these areas, it's basically he will review the internal control system, operating effectiveness, the efficiency. Yes, very good. It is there. He will see that the risks are being mitigated, frauds are detected by the controls, and if there is any limitation on the internal control, he should also see that if there are any mitigating controls. Okay. So these are few things which are there for the internal controls. For the custodianship and the safeguard of the asset. Now, from where this is coming? Custodianship and the safeguard of the asset. See, remember, we talked about review of operations. Okay, review of operations, something. What is review of operations? Operations include your maintaining fixed assets. When I talk about reviewing operations, that includes your fixed assets and other assets also. And again, when I talk about reviewing operations, your operations includes that your fixed assets and other assets should be maintained appropriately. Okay, so from there, compliance with policies, plans, from there it is coming with the custodianship and safeguarding of the asset. One of the area which is there for the applicable for the internal auditor. Just one correction over here. This will come from here. Okay. So review of operations and then fixed asset. Now, when I talk about review of operations and existence and condition of the assets, internal auditor will not see. We remember there is a standard on the existence and conditions of the inventory. If you want to gather the audit evidence, which standard is that? SA 501. Very good. Yes. So when I talk about SA 501, auditor has to take part in the inventory count which is performed by the management, and then auditor has to also perform the inventory count. So when I talk about inventory count being performed by the management, over there it is internal auditors who will perform the inventory count on behalf of the management. Okay, they will be there who will perform the not only inventory count but fixed asset physical verifications. So there is something the duty of the internal auditor to verify the existence of the asset, and along with that the auditor will also use the work which is being performed by the internal auditor. So from there this requirement is coming. Next is compliance with plans and procedures and regulations and everything, similar to what we have seen, that the internal auditor is required to see that he is looking onto the areas like if a particular law is applicable, then the law is being followed or not. If there is a SOP, then that SOP is being followed or not. So all these things are there, that if there is a particular, let's say, plan which is proposed by the company, which is already approved by the company, then that is being followed or not. Now there is a question: physical verification is done by internal auditor or employees of the company? So when I talk about physical verification, in a lot of inventory based and heavy manufacturing companies, it is done by both. So when I talk about physical verification done by the employee is from the purchase department, not from the inventory department. They do a first level check of the inventory, okay, or they may with the warehouse management team do a first level of check. The second level of check is done by the internal auditors. Internal auditors also perform the inventory count, and then comes the statutory auditor. The third line of defense is there. Clear? Any doubt? Then comes the relevance and reliability of the information. Now, anyone can tell me what I meant by relevance and reliability of the information, and why internal auditor is, concerned with this area. What is there in this area? Why internal auditor is concerned with this area? Anyone? Financial information and operating evaluating of such information. Okay. What else? Why this area is important and from where it is coming? Why this scope is relevant to the internal auditor? So let me tell you, when I talk about relevance and the reliability of the information, it is not only the financial but the non-financial information that is flowing across the company. Okay, so when I talk about this, it is the financial and non-financial information that flow, okay, across the company, from, you can say, one department to another department, one DPT to another, or one system to another. Why this is relevant? Why this is relevant? Can anyone tell me COSO framework of the internal control? COSO framework, which is the COSO framework of the internal controls. There are 5 parts of that particular framework. One was the control environment. Second was risk assessment. Third was control activities. Fourth was information and monitoring. Information, that is sharing of the data internally and externally. If you are not able to share data internally or externally appropriately, your internal control environment is not appropriate. That's where review of the relevance and the reliability of the information comes into the place. That if the information is being supplied to the external agencies, to any of the outside people and not to the inside, it has to be accurate, it has to be relevant, and there should be a reliability of that information. Okay, the reports which are being generated, they should be useful. If there's the automated systems in place, ERPs, okay, so the information which is generated by this system should be proper, data integrity should be there. Otherwise, how can you say that the information that you are getting out of the system is correct? So relevance and the reliability of the information is also something which is being monitored by the internal control. Then comes the utilization of resources. Then comes the organizational structure. Why organizational structure is important? Anyone? Why organizational structure is important? Anyone? Why organizational structure is being monitored by the internal auditors? If there is a complex organizational structure, accountability, responsibility will, fade away. It will become very difficult to identify who is doing what. The information flow will get restricted. Monitoring will not happen. The control environment will collapse. That's why it's become very important to understand that organizational structure is appropriate or not. Okay. Nowadays, there is something, called lean organizational structure. Lean organizational structure, which is being followed by many entities. Lean structure. They call it lean. Okay. That means instead of having, 10 different departments and 10 different people, and, 10 different reporting from here and there, they minimize the management layers. They cut out the, unnecessary reporting requirements and make it more effective and efficient. So a kind of a organizational structure that, basically what they do is, instead of having 10 different people reporting here and there, they look into that and they also suggest how you can make it more lean, more appropriate. And a lot of work goes on to that particular area. So there is something called lean transformation, or you can say, value driven organization, or you can say informational driven lean organizations, kind of things. A lot of work happen on that particular area also, because as the organization grows, they become very complex. Okay. So there are a lot of models behind that, how to make an organization lean, and accordingly, uh, they kind of suggest the management that how you can make the organization lean. That's where the organizational structure is one such area. Okay. So, and the achievements and goals is vision and mission of the company is being, so company is progressing in an area where, they are achieving goals or not. That's one such area. So these are certain areas for the, internal auditors that they work upon. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt till now? Okay, good. We understood about the areas of the internal audit. We understood who are the internal auditors. We understood to whom it is applicable. Now we need to understand the working of the internal audit. One such area is that how do they work? Not which areas. Not about, I'm not talking about the scope of the internal audit. Now I am talking about to the process. So we went from the applicability to the scope. We went from the appointments to the areas. But now, in between, we need to see what is the process they follow, what kind of process they follow. And for that, first of all, there was one essay that we were talking about. Can anyone tell me that essay which is applicable to the using the work of internal auditor? That is, similar, like something related to the, on that area. Using the work of internal auditor, which is that particular essay? Quickly, the number. Using the work of an internal auditor. Pretty easy. Yes, essay 610. Absolutely correct. Now, let's go and see that essay. And there is something in that particular essay that we need to discuss. Okay. There is something in that particular standard that we need to discuss. And based on that, we will understand that the process, how important it is. What is the process of internal audit, and how it is and why it is important basically. This is your XA 610. Okay. Using the work of internal auditor. Now, if I talk about from the external auditor's perspective, okay, so external auditor basically has to understand, can he use the work of internal auditor? If yes, to what extent? Okay. So when I talk about the using of the work of internal auditor, one such area is to determine whether the work of internal audit function or direct assistance can be used. If so, in which areas and to what extent? First, we will deal this part. To what extent? To decide to what extent I can use the work of internal auditor, or to decide, can I use the work of internal auditor? Like, can this work be used? Areas we will take later on. But first, to decide this, can I use the work of internal auditor? I need to evaluate the internal audit function. I need to evaluate the internal audit function. Now, this evaluation happens on three important parts. Okay. One, while evaluating, I see that whether the internal audit functions, organizational status, okay, their relevant policies and procedures support the objectivity of the internal auditor. Now tell me, we saw something this on the LODR. We saw something related to the LODR on this area. What was that? Audit functions, organizational status. What we saw in the LODR about this? What we saw in the LODR about this? We discussed something. Yes, no? We discussed something when we were discussing about the SEBI LODR regulations. About this particular part. Testing of estimates, no. Okay, let me show you. So when we were discussing about the LODR regulations, or just passing a reference for that, at that point in time, I discussed basically something called the reporting requirement. This is from the LODR regulations. Okay. What it says in the LODR regulation, it says that the internal auditor may report directly to the audit committee. Plus, there are other requirements in the LODR regulation which says that audit committee is required to review the work of internal auditor. Yes or no? So the organizational status means to whom they are reporting. What is their reporting requirement? Basically, it happens that, let's say for example, internal audit is reporting to a particular manager, and then manager is reporting to the CFO to the audit committee. So where is the internal auditor placed in the organization? Do they have the access to those charged with governance or not? Because if they are reporting to the CFO and then CFO is reporting to the audit committee, then at that point in time, when they will audit the finance function, there is a chance that there will be an issue of the objectivity, because they are auditing an area which is being managed by their manager, CFO. Okay. And there is a high chance that they may come under the pressure of the CFO and they may not report bad about the CFO, because again, they are reporting to him. CFO is their manager and everything is with the CFO, like what they need to do, how they need to do, and everything. So we need to understand the internal audit function, organizational status, to whom they report. It becomes very important. Plus, we need to see something called their level of competency, how competent they are, and whether internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. This is what I'm talking about. Till that time, internal audit function does not apply a systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control, I cannot rely upon them. I cannot rely, as a statutory auditor, I cannot rely upon their work. Now, from where I can identify this? What this means? What means a systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control? Big question mark. From where I can find a systematic and disciplined approach? Anyone? Where this approach is documented, simple, or mentioned. Where this approach is documented or mentioned. Anyone? Section 138? No, because section 138 only talks about that. Let's go back to the section 138. What was section 138? Section 138 was that central government may prescribe rules and manners and intervals in which internal audit shall be conducted and reported to the board. And if you talk about Rule 13, it talks about that audit committee or the board shall, in consultation with the internal auditor, formulate a scope, function, periodicity, and methodology for conducting the internal audit. But there is nothing about the disciplined or systematic approach. There is nothing about the disciplined and systematic approach. Tell me, see, if I follow standards on auditing, SA, I would say that I am following professional standards, a systematic and disciplined approach of the audit. For the internal audit, it is nothing but the standards on internal audit, SIA. If you follow these, that is the systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. And let's understand that. So till the time the internal audit is not following these standards, very hard to say that they are following a systematic and disciplined approach. So these standards, including quality control. So there is a quality control standards on the internal audit, which is QI, QS, IA1 and QS IA2. Then there is a section, then there are the core principle standards 100 series, which is SIA 10, basic principles, terms of engagement, managing internal audit function, internal controls, risk management, compliance with laws and regulations. Then you have a series 200, which talks about knowledge of the entity, planning, evidence, use of tools, internal audit documentation. Okay. Then comes the 300 series, which is reporting, issuing assurance report, special purpose report, presentation. Okay. This is how the entire set of standards or the framework of the internal audit is divided into. Let's understand more onto this. Okay. When I talk about internal audit framework or this entire framework, okay, what I'm talking about here is that there are basic principles, first of all, of the internal audit. Then there is a core concept, then there are the standards, and then there is the guidance. Okay. So if I talk about the pillar, how the principle or how the framework of internal audit works is, first there are basic principles. Can anyone tell me what do you mean by basic principles, or what do you think of basic principles when I talk about basic principles of internal audit? What are the basic principles? Anyone? Yes, very good. If I talk about basic principle, it is nothing but independence, integrity, objectivity, due professional care, confidentiality, skill competence, ethical behavior, system and process focus, risk-based audit, providing insight in decision making, sensitive to these stakeholders' interests, quality and continuous improvement, deploying technology and tools, basic principles. Then there are the core concepts which are there for the internal audit. Can anyone tell me what is core concepts? Like core concepts are like terms of internal audit, managing the internal audit function, internal control, risk management, the concepts that we are talking about, which are there: value addition, reporting, compliance with laws and regulations. Few core concepts are there. Then we are talking about standard. Standard basically, if I talk about, okay, if I talk about the standard, the 100 series of the standard, if we go back and recall that, the 100 series of the standard is about the core concepts only. So when I talk about core concepts, it's nothing but the 100 series. The 200 series talks about the audit execution, and the 300 talks about the reporting. Okay. So when I talk about core concept, it's nothing but the 100 series of these standards. And the rest of the standard 200 and 300 series is execution and the reporting. And then there is a guidance given behind each and every standard that you need to follow. Okay. And there is a ethical principles, which is there. If you follow this framework for the internal audit, it is nothing but your systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. Clear to this point? Why these are very important? From where to where we went? From the use of internal audit, using the work of internal auditor, to what extent or whether we can use it or not, it is determined by the evaluation of the internal audit function. Evaluation happens on the if the internal audit function follows a systematic and disciplined approach, and from there we came to the standards on internal auditing. Okay. Now the question is, sir, whether the statutory auditor is required to follow these standards before they can use the work of internal auditor? Answer is no. See, these standards are for the internal auditor. You need to see, as a statutory auditor, external auditor, you need to see whether the internal auditor has followed these standards or not. You are required to follow as a statutory auditor? No. Internal auditor is required to follow? Yes. So you need to see whether internal auditor has followed these standards or not. Let's say now you come into the role of the internal auditor. Let's say from statutory auditor, let's transition to the role of internal auditor. Assume you are the internal auditor. At that point in time, it becomes important for you to follow these standards. Otherwise, your work cannot be used by statutory auditors, and your work will not be a reliable work. Applicable for the exam? To the extent what I am discussing, yes. Not all SIA, but to the extent what I am discussing. Clear? Any doubt till now? See, again, when I talk about applicability for the exam, read the study material, because the topics which are given in the study material, those are the things which are applicable for your exam. For example, if your study material specifies a particular standards on internal auditing, that will be applicable. Simple example, if I give you, here we have discussed on the SIA 210. So if something is discussed on the SIA 210, that means to that extent it is applicable. For example, there is a part in your study material which talks about integrity. objectivity and independence of the internal auditor. Ethical values, just now we saw in the framework. Okay, then we are talking about basically performing the internal audit engagement, 5-step approach. If somewhere in this particular part, if a particular reference is there, that is applicable. Okay, for example, sampling or review of audit supervision. So few things are there which is applicable. So we have seen these things. Some standards are there that those are applicable, and accordingly these standards will be there in the exam. For example, SIA 390. Okay, accordingly these are the applicable part. So whatever is there in your study material, that is applicable. Any doubt? How do the internal auditor will come will sorry how do the statutory auditor check whether internal auditor has followed these standards or not? By reviewing their work papers. So a statutory auditor will review the work papers, will review the policies, will review the documents, and from there he will come to know whether these standards have been followed or not. Any doubt? Any doubt till now? Okay. If no doubts, then let's do one thing. Let's take a quick 10-minute break. After the break, we'll gather back and continue the session. Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Thank you. एक minute. Let's okay. Let's start. Shall we continue? Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome back. Let's continue the discussion. So before the break, we were talking about the discipline and systematic approach and the standards on internal auditing, internal audit. See, now we need to understand these standards and some of the aspects of these standards in much more detail so that we can understand how the process works for the internal audit. Okay. Now, when I talk about internal audit standards, okay, standards on internal auditing, first let's understand SIA 210. That is the managing the internal audit function. Okay. So how an internal audit function is required to be managed? Reason because we need to understand, like now we have to think from the perspective of the internal auditor. Okay, now we have to understand from the perspective of the internal auditor. First of all, let's understand what is internal audit function. Can anyone tell me what do you mean by internal audit function? What is internal audit function? Quickly. What is internal audit function? Risk management. I'm not talking about those functions. I'm not talking about functions of internal audit. I'm talking about internal audit function. What do you mean by internal audit function? Like when we say this term internal audit function, what it means? I'm not talking about some mathematical function also. I'm not talking about functions of internal audit. No, I'm talking about internal audit function. Simple. Okay. Because when I talk about this particular term, internal audit function, okay, managing the internal audit function, that means the managing the internal audit department. That's a function that means over here. Okay, it's the department that we are talking about. Okay, managing the internal audit department or function, when I say group of people, okay, entire group of people which are there, that's the function. So when I talk about this internal audit function, okay, managing the internal audit function, what is the basically role of the chief internal auditor in that and how it is required to be done? So when you have to maintain the internal audit function, you have to manage the internal audit function, that the entire department and the set of people that I'm talking about. Okay. Few things that we need to understand is that before proceeding to any of the audit, before you start any of the audit, you need to have, okay, you need to have kind of a plan, overall plan, that what and how you will be doing the audit. What are the you can say structure of your audits going to be? Are your audits going to be IT audits? Are your audits going to be internal audits? So how these audits are going to be? Okay, overall plan of your audits, the scope, the areas you are going to cover. Okay, then how and what will be the frequency of the audit? Basically, let's say for a talk about frequency of the audit. Okay, when I talk about frequency, that means how frequent you will conduct the audit of various other departments or organizations, various other departments, various other activities, or you can say the scope that we have already discussed, how frequent you will take care of those particular activities. That is something you need to provide in a particular document. Okay, you have to document something, entire this thing, and the moment you document, it becomes a document called charter. That is internal audit charter. Okay, what is internal audit charter? Internal audit charter basically is kind of a document, you can say, which gives all this information, which gives the mandate to the internal auditor. Okay, I'll tell you some keywords or some important terms with respect to the internal audit. One is internal audit charter. Okay, this charter or this document basically is kind of a document which is basically provides that what they are going to do. So let me show you a public internal audit document, a public internal audit charter. Okay, one of the you can say this is the company which is listed outside India, but it is going to remain the same on a basic similar lines. Okay, so do not focus on the name of the company. This is just the internal audit charter that we are going to discuss. I'm going to show you some real internal audit charter document available in the public domain. Okay, so if you see, the purpose of internal audit function is to strengthen the company's name, to achieve success of its objective, governance, decision making, reputation. Okay, and they will now this is an international organization, so that's why they are mentioning reference to the global internal audit standards. Okay, then authority, which is the first part of the document, which is mandate, like from where they are getting the power to conduct the internal audit. That's the mandate. So audit and risk committee in India, audit committee. Okay, they have authorized them. They have granted the internal audit function the mandate. That's the power to provide the board and senior management with objective assurance and everything. Okay, then independence related matters which are there in the charter, changes to the mandate and charter, that how or if there is a change, then when they can do the change, what are the procedure for change, audit and risk committee oversight, what they will look for. Okay, now chief internal auditor roles and responsibility, ethics, professionalism, objectivity, plus managing the internal audit function that we are talking about. At least annually they will develop a risk based internal audit plan that consider the input of the audit and risk committee, senior management. They will discuss the plan with the audit committee and senior management. They will submit the plan to the audit committee for review, communicate the impact of the resource limitation, review and adjust the internal audit plan. Okay, then there are a lot of things that the internal audit function is required to do. Follow up on the engagement findings, ensure internal audit engagements are performed, documented, and communicated in accordance with the global internal audit standards, communicate with the audit and risk committee, establish and ensure adherence to the methodologies designed to guide the internal audit function. A lot of things are there. Then they talk about the communication with those charged with governance. Okay, quality assurance program, then scope and type of internal audit surveys, and internal audit charter approval. A lot of things are there. So this is the internal audit charter. Okay, this charter basically provides how the internal audit will work, kind of, you can say. Okay, so that is something to achieve its objective. Internal audit function, okay, performs the numerous activities. They are outlined in a document called charter, and this is what charter is that we just now I show you. Okay, so showed you that it defines the overall plan, scope, methodology of the internal audit function, who will oversee, what they will do. A lot of things are there in this document. Communication, development of quality evaluation program. Okay, resources, plan, acquire, and engage in performance of the start. A lot of things are there. Just now we saw one such charter, and there are multiple charters available in public domain, because these charters, most of the companies, they provide in the public domain because it's a requirement. Externally, it is very important requirement for the companies to publicly provide this charter to the stakeholders. Okay, so all these things are documented in a document called charter, and there you have a mandate also. Okay, so that is something the term charter or a few important internal audit document is. Now with respect to the responsibility of the internal audit function, we already seen the scope. If you convert that scope into the responsibilities or area wise, that is the responsibility that the internal audit function has to fulfill. Okay. So internal audit function is not only required to test all those areas that we have discussed in the scope, but there are, if you convert those areas as a responsibility, that are the responsibilities the internal audit function has to fulfill. Okay. So responsibilities, you can say that, it's a conversion of the scope, because the moment I say scope, that is the area that the internal audit is required to see. Clear? Any doubt till now? Okay. And further, if I talk about managing the function, okay, managing this entire internal audit function. So internal audit is not only required to, like, the function is not only required to prepare these charters. Actually, from time to time, they see that whether we are meeting the plan. If yes or no, then what is the deviation? And they constantly report that to the relevant stakeholders. They execute the plan and they see the deviation. They see if there is a limitation, and then they report that limitation to those charged with governance. They actually perform, or they create the trainings, they undertake the development of the professional staff, they identify, and they also hire experts whenever required, and they communicate with not only those charged with governance, but a lot of committees are there in very in listed companies or in big corporates. They coordinate with them, they reach out to them, they hear their problems and their you can say requirements, and accordingly they alter the plan if required. So communication with key stakeholders within the organization is very important. And at the end, they develop a program called Quality Assessment and Improvement Program, QAIP program. Okay. So again, that is to monitor and improve the quality of the function. So a lot of things are done. Basically, they check whether they need to bring some technology. They think that, okay, do we need to do a training, quality assurance? A lot of things are done in that particular area. Clear? Plus, when I talk about terms of the internal audit function, okay, the terms that they agree, terms of internal audit engagement. So there is a standard also, standard on terms of internal audit engagement. Okay. So when I talk about this particular standard, what happens is, like, sometimes you will have an internal auditor who can be employee also, who can be an external person also. But in that particular case, if he is an external person, it is very important to document the engagement terms, which defines kind of the scope of internal audit function, clarity, like who are the internal auditors to the organization, who are the stakeholders, what is the expectation from the internal audit function. It should not be the case that there is internal audit function and they are expecting that you perform forensic audit or forensic accounting. If, let's say, they are internal auditors and they will ask, okay, perform the investigation. So what is expected from us as an internal auditor? What are we as an internal auditor to the organization? Are we responsible for finding the fraud, or are we responsible to do the internal audit within the organization? Okay. Then understanding of the key operational areas, okay, conditions under which the assurance can be expressed, very important. We are talking about assurance in the internal audit report that can be there. Timelines for the conduct of and submission of the internal audit report, and if any, there is a limitation on the scope of internal audit. So all these things are bare minimum things that you need to agree with before undertaking an internal audit assignment. Okay. Now, if a person is the outsourced internal auditor, there will be an engagement letter. But what if the person is an inside employee? Can you go and sign and ask for the engagement letter? Let's say I'm the employee of the company. Can I go and ask, okay, sign the engagement letter with me? Can I do that? I am the employee of the company. They appointed me as an internal auditor. Can I ask them that, okay, let's do one thing. Let's sign the engagement letter between us. Then what is the role of employment letter? In that scenario, you don't go and you get a engagement letter signed. Instead, there is the audit memo, audit scope memo, audit assignment memo, or audit memo, internal audit memo that is being issued to you. For the in-house internal auditors, there is an internal audit memo that is issued, which contains all these details. For the external internal auditors, for the to say internal auditors who are appointed, who are not part of the organization, they are not the employees, outsourced internal auditors, there is an engagement letter. Okay. Again, there could be assurance on the internal audit engagement. When you provide a report, let's say you are a outsourced internal auditor, that means you are not part of the organization but as an independent third party. At that point in time, you can issue reasonable assurance reports or a limited assurance report, provided you comply with these standards. But the moment you are an internal employee, or the moment there is no independence or objectivity, or there are conditions which are not being satisfied, you should not issue an assurance report. Okay. For example, if you are performing the agreed upon procedures, for example, you are doing some reviews, okay, with a consultation engagement. So there is a conflict of interest that you are consulting, you are also providing consultation, and then you are also checking the implementation. So you need to understand, is that engagement of that particular nature where there is no conflict of interest, I'm meeting all the requirements, then only I can issue the reasonable or limited assurance report, otherwise I cannot. Clear? Any doubt? Now, when we talk about performing an internal audit engagement, okay, let's go to the standards and see something. Again, I will not as of now go into the deep of the standards to this particular area, but we will go in depth of the process understanding rather than the standard understanding in detail as of now. So when I talk about the process of internal audit, okay, it is kind of similar what you have seen for the normal audit. When I talk about the process is, first you get the engagement done, whether you are an internal or external. Then you obtain the knowledge of business and its environment. If you take this in the normal audit scenario, it's nothing but essay. Which essay? 300 or 315, understanding the business and its environment. Then you perform audit planning. Okay, you perform the audit planning. Again, which essay I'm talking about over here? Essay 300. Very good. Essay 300. Then I go and gather the information. Again, normal audit, which essay? 500 series. Yes, audit evidence. Okay. Then I perform the audit checks. So again, you can say that here it will be 500 series. So some specific checks are there related to the going concern, related to the related parties, or some specific areas might be there. So I'll write 500 series. And reporting. For normal audit, the reporting gets covered in SA 700. This is just for the reference. Okay. We have referred, or we have, comparing the normal audit with the internal audit. This is the comparison with the normal audit with the internal audit. Okay. So now when I talk about understanding the business, in internal audit, you have a SA, you have a SIA, knowledge of the entity and its environment, 210. Then you do the planning, 220. Audit evidence, 230. Okay. Then again, experts, third parties, review supervision, internal audit documentation, all these things are there. Communication with those charges, governance. Then comes the reporting, 310, 320, and 330. So these are certain reportings which are there. Okay. So all these things are applicable. And then similar process that we are talking about. Okay. This is how it works. I'll not go in much detail, but few things we will discuss is, first of all, obtaining the knowledge of business. So internal auditor basically, has to obtain. So how he will obtain? Meeting the key people, okay, key stakeholders, board of directors. He will go through the various business documents. He will understand the IT systems the way auditors does. It's nothing new that we are understanding. It's the same auditor concept. Okay, performing the audit, same. When you perform the plan, as we already seen that we communicate the plan. So you must share the details of audit plan. You must take the opening meeting, similar to something we also saw in the PSU audit. Okay, and then if the plan is approved, then you start evaluating that plan. You perform that plan. You gather information, okay, so that you can perform the audit. You will gather the information, and then you do the testing. For example, analytical procedures, okay, to the extent possible, you will use the tools, internal audit evidence, a lot of things are there, documentation, and then comes the reporting. Okay, so basically reporting part, which includes there 2 to 3 type of reports that we will discuss. Okay, so the first type of report basically is the standard report, or the I would say main report. So at the end of each assignment, each audit assignment, an internal report covering the specific areas, function, or a detailed report is prepared about that. For example, if I'm doing the audit of a sales function, at the end of basically the audit of the sale function, I will prepare a detailed report. Okay, main report, kind of detailed report. Once I will prepare this detailed report, based on that, okay, I will prepare a periodic report. Okay, why? I'll just show you a internal audit plan. Now, how the plan looks like, I'll just show you some rough idea about that. I'll give you a rough idea about the plan. So when an internal audit team prepares a plan, what they basically do is, let's say for example, they will take out the entire calendar year, let's say from April, May, June, July, August, and September. I'm just preparing for the half year so that you can understand. Month. Okay. Now they have a various internal audit teams. So internal audit function has various internal audit managers. So what they do is they plot the internal audit manager. Internal audit manager 3. Okay. Let's say they have an internal IT auditor 1, and let's say they are also have a data privacy. So data privacy auditor 1. Now they will allocate the areas. Let's say they will say it, okay, let's do sales. You do the sales. You do, let's say, warehousing. Okay. Or you do, let's say, a specific expense, contract expense, contractor. Then IT auditor, they will give X tool to audit. For data privacy, again, they will say that, okay, you do the data privacy for X tool. For May, they will come and they will say, no, instead of X sale, like let's say there are multiple sale streams in the company. Let's say sale is there, or if I talk about manufacturing company, so sale from X product, and they will do start to end. So customer onboarding, and then price list, sales order, dispatch, sale invoicing, collection, everything. Or sometimes they may bifurcate also. No, in May we will do collection of sale of Y product. Okay, and they will instead of warehousing X location, they say now, okay, do one thing, you do warehouse Y location. Similarly, they prepare the entire plan, bifurcating here and there, everything. So when I say these plan are prepared, so what they do is, let's say at the end of April, they will issue this report. Okay, this is nothing but the end of assignment report. End of assignment report, which will contain a detail of, okay, when we audited the sale of X product, what areas we covered, what was the population, what period we covered, and how we audited, what are the outcomes, findings, everything over there. At the end of either quarter, let's say at the end of June quarter, or sometimes in some organization it is half annually, but mostly it is quarterly. So at the end of June quarter, whatever audits are prepared, okay, they will combine all these audits and they will prepare a combined report. Combined periodic report, which will be of a kind of a summary of each and every report. Okay, and this summary is presented to the audit committee. This summary is presented to the audit committee. So quarter on quarter basis, when the audit committee meets, one of the criteria, one of the agenda is to review the findings of the internal audit. And this is not I'm saying. This is not something that only I am saying it. And to show you, let me open the LODR for you guys. Okay, let's go and understand in the LODR. Because here we will understand kind of the requirements that the audit committee does and how the reporting is linked with that. Okay, let me perform a search. Just a minute. Yep. Okay, if you see, these are certain role of audit committee. This is the role of audit committee and the review of information by the audit committee. And this is LODR, SEBI LODR regulations. One such area in this regulation is that review with the management performance of the statutory and internal auditors. Okay, and then they are required to review findings on the internal investigation by the internal auditors. Okay, plus review the adequacy of the internal audit function, discuss with the internal auditors any significant findings and follow up thereon. And this entire thing, when I'm talking about discussions, then this is done quarterly. Okay, when audit committee meets. Basically, audit committee meeting happens quarterly in every organization. Okay, so when I talk about audit committee, they meet quarterly and they discuss. One of the agenda is discussion of these areas. And when I talk about discussion of these areas, as a result, basically what happens is, the reporting that I'm talking about, periodic reporting, is discussed in these meetings. And why I'm saying there is a quarterly, meeting of the audit committee. What is the reason of that? Again, LODR. Okay, what LODR says is that if I talk about the meeting of the audit committee, at least 4 times in a financial year and not more than 120 days between 2 consecutive meetings. So audit committee shall meet at least 4 times quarterly, not between 120 days between 2 meetings. So because of this, they meet at least quarterly. And in that, they discuss the reporting that I'm talking about. that periodic reporting. Okay, this periodic reporting is being discussed in the quarterly audit committee. So we have already seen from the SEBI LODR that how this quarterly reporting is coming into the picture and why it is relevant. Okay, so assignment end is one thing, but after this assignment gets over, and when there is a audit committee meeting happens. So from last audit committee, whatever new assignments have been performed or closed till the date of the new audit committee meeting in the coming quarter, they cover all the assignments, and accordingly they basically present a summary and they report this summary to the audit committee. This is how the quarterly reporting or periodic basis reporting works. The purpose is to provide the summary of all the basically plans and all the audits they have done, where they are with the plan, are they meeting the plan, is there any deviation, whatever audits they have performed, what deviation is this. So a lot of details are there. Okay, and on the basis of that they discuss all these details. Okay, now when I talk about this reporting part, internal audit reporting, okay, periodic reporting or quarterly reporting, we'll first come to the periodic reporting. When I talk about periodic reporting, basically as we have the format of the report for our normal statutory audit report, in a similar way we might not have the format for the internal audit, but we have something called a basic outline of the internal audit reports. These outlines are kind of minimum structure and content of the report. They provide this should be the minimum structure and the content for the report at minimum. Okay, the internal audit report at minimum should contain title, report reference, addressee, executive summary, okay, audit objective and scope, methodology and criteria, detailed observations and recommendations, management response and action plans, conclusions or opinion if you are doing an assurance based, limitations and the date of the report and signature. Basic things. These are the minimum things which are required to be specified in your internal audit report. Okay, basic minimum things. And then on the basis of these things, the quarterly is prepared. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay, now one important thing is, let's say for example, we are talking about this particular example. Okay, so various audits were undertaken. As of now, let's say these audits were undertaken. Okay, now some audit passed, that means there were no issues, so I'll tick mark them. Okay, these audit passed, but certain audit failed, like there were a lot of issues. Okay, now audit committee meeting happened, and after the meeting you presented all your findings. Once you present your finding, again 3 months will pass, and then the next audit committee meeting will happen, let's say over here. At this particular juncture, audit committee will ask you, are the open issues closed now? Which are these open issues? These are the open issues that they failed and you presented already to the audit committee. Okay, so audit committee will definitely ask these things. Are these open issues closed now? Because you identified the issue, you have to close them also by providing the suggestions and following up with the management that they close the issues. Okay, and this is called the monitoring or follow-up audit. So once you identify an audit, you do a follow-up on the prior audit issues. You do the monitoring that, okay, we have done the audit. Okay, now tell us how you are going to close. Management will say, give us 2 months, we will close the issue, and then you can check. So after 2 months, you will go back and see, oh, have you closed the issue? They will say yes or they will say no. If they say yes, you have to test whether they have closed the issue or not. And if they have closed, then on the basis of that, you need to communicate to the audit committee that audit committee, they have closed the issue. Okay, so in subsequent, basically, audit committee meeting, like you presented the issue in this meeting. Okay, you presented the issue here. Here you need to provide the closure of issue. If the timelines are 3 months, sometimes the issues are so big that the timelines are 6 months, 1 year. So in every meeting you need to provide an update. Okay, this is an update, we are on the track, we are closing the issues, and it will be closed by this due date. Otherwise that will become a statutory audit observation. Clear? Any doubt? So that is the follow-up. Now follow-up, after follow-up, you present a report called action taken report on the previous audit. Like what action has been taken, whether the issues has been closed or not, and how the things are working upon. Okay, till this point, any doubt? Any doubt till this particular point? Yes, ATR, action taken report, will form part of the summary report, which is presented quarterly. If there is the action taken report, like if there are things which are getting due and which were required to be closed in the previous quarters compared to your audit meeting. So if the audit meeting is now, then whatever was getting due before this, and if it is being closed or not, you need to present in the action taken report. So any doubt? Okay, if no doubts, remember we started this particular point from a standard. We were talking about internal audit function, and then from there we went to SIA and everything did. So whether the internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, including the quality control, now you know what is the systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. At least you have a basic understanding of the systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. Yes or no? Now you have basic understanding. So to examine whether you can use the work of internal audit function, this is a function. Remember, internal audit function, the department, the people, not a mathematical function. Okay. So when I talk about internal audit function, can you use to whom they report? So one thing is to whom they report. Second is competency. Now, what about competency? How will you identify competency? Anyone? How will you identify competency? How will you identify competency? Anyone? Very important. Qualification, experience. Yes, absolutely correct. Qualification, experience, something called competency. Okay, that will help us to evaluate the competency that is there for the internal audit function. Okay, so when I talk about the competency, I need to see whether the internal auditor is a chartered accountant. or it's someone else, internal employee. If he is an internal employee, what qualification does he possess? Okay, what experience does he possess? Because let's say tomorrow a graduate, or you can say recently uh, person who is recently graduated from a particular normal college, and he has been given the task of performing internal audit, who has no experience in the internal audit, who has no experience in the internal audit, and he has been given the task of performing internal audit of a big listed entity. I may not rely. I may not rely. So I need to see the competency of the internal audit function itself. What is the size of internal audit function? Let's say there's a listed company whose turnover is in lakhs of crore, and there are only 2 people in the internal audit function. Their turnover is in lakhs of crore, complex IT company with different solutions, and only 2 people with the internal audit function. Are you understanding that point? And to this particular part, there is a reporting also that the auditor is required to do with internal audit function. Can anyone tell me which is that reporting that the auditor is required to do with respect to the internal audit function? Very good. Yes, absolutely. Caro. Yes or no? Let me show you. In the audit report, when I talk about, there is a Caro reporting that auditor says that in our opinion, the company has an adequate internal audit system that commensurate with the size and the nature of the business. And we have considered the internal audit report issued during the year till the date of the audit report covering period up to 31st March 2026. That means whether the internal audit function is of that size, that commensurate, that is in alignment with the business. Second, have you considered the reports? So to consider the reports, I will see how, to what extent I can use the function, use the work of internal auditor. Okay, so to ensure the Caro reporting also, like I need to see to what extent organizational structure, evaluation of the internal auditor, all these points I have to see. Otherwise, I cannot comment on these areas in the Caro. Now, second part is, if any of the thing is missing, I may not rely upon the work that is being performed by the internal audit function. And in that particular scenario, I can say I cannot use the internal audit function. Okay. If any of the point is missing, I will say I cannot use the internal audit work, the work performed by the internal audit function. Now, second part that I need to discuss is in which areas you can use the work of internal auditor and to what extent. In which areas you can use the work of internal auditor. If an area involves planning, okay, has more judgment in planning, more judgment in audit evidence gathering, area is of higher risk of material misstatement, okay, or the area where the internal audit functions, organization structure or competency is not there, I will not perform or I will not use the work of internal auditor in that area. So, for example, let's understand, if the functions, okay, internal audit functions, organizational status in that particular area is not adequate. That means, let's say this is internal audit function, they report to CFO and CFO reports to, let's say, audit committee. But there are other also, like Chief Procurement Officer, Chief Operational Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Sales Officer. So there's these areas I can audit, or I can use the work of internal auditor, because the internal audit function is not reporting to Chief Procurement Auditor or Chief Procurement Officer or Chief Marketing Officer or Chief Sales Officer. So if internal audit function is going to do the audit of sales function, marketing function, procurement function, fine for me. Organizational status supports. But if he is doing the audit of the finance function, I may not use the work of internal auditor, because they are reporting to CFO. Or the level of competency of internal audit function is lower in that area. That means they don't have a technical knowledge to do the audit of marketing area. I will not use their work in the marketing area. Or the risk of material misstatement is higher. If something, if some risk is higher, that means I need more audit evidence. And to get the more audit evidence, do audit yourself as an external auditor. Simple. I cannot rely, because relying may provide you lesser audit evidence. If there is more judgment involved in planning or performing the audit, or audit, evaluating the audit evidence, at that point in time also, the judgment is involved, because now auditor's responsibility is there for the professional judgment. For that, statutory auditor is responsible. For all the professional judgments, statutory auditor is responsible. If there is more judgment involved, that means statutory auditor has to take that professional judgment, and he has to be responsible for that, rather than putting that responsibility on the internal auditor. So these are the areas where I will not use the work of internal auditor or the work of internal audit function. To what extent? To this extent. Excluding these areas, I can rely upon the work of internal auditor, subject to criteria, subject to evaluation. But apart from these areas, on these areas, I will not rely. Clear? So in order to use the work of internal auditor, I need to see whether that work was properly planned, performed, and supervised, reviewed, or documented, whether there are sufficient and appropriate evidence to draw reasonable conclusions, okay, whether their conclusions are appropriate, okay, and consistent with the result of work. Simple example here, whether they followed internal auditing standards. Over here, I will see whether they have sufficient and appropriate evidence, okay, the way we talk about audit evidence, quality and quantity. And here I will see the conclusion. Why? Because sometimes it may happen that, let's say, they tested 10 samples, failed samples, 5, okay, and then they concluded, okay, test passed, no observations noted. If they do documentation like this, what you will do? You need to see the conclusion which is there. This conclusion which is there is consistent with the testing which is done. Okay, otherwise you will not be able to rely upon the work they have performed. Okay. So someone is asking a question, sir, where it is in the study material. Basically, if you go to the 7.1, okay, or using the work of internal auditor, this is coming from here. So evaluation of the internal audit function, scope and objectivity that we talked about. Okay, determining that how much you can use, level of competency, systematic discipline approach, quality control that we discussed. Okay, then whether they are planning, performing the relevant audit procedures, evaluation of audit evidence, if there's a judgment where you cannot use, okay, higher risk areas, okay, significant judgments. So these are certain areas where we cannot use their function, their work. Okay, then you need to see when you are using the work. So everything, like you are required to refer the SA 610 for more details over here. So that's why I'm covering the SA 610 over here. Clear? Any doubt? That's why it's important to read the study material. Read. Unless and until you will not read the study material, you will not come to know what is there, what is not, and how it is required to be, like understood that particular topic. Okay. So this is one such area where I can use the work of internal auditors. Plus, there is another type of work that they can perform for me, which is direct assistance, providing direct assistance. Now, what is direct assistance? Basically, over here, they will work for the statutory auditors unless and until it is not prohibited by law. If it is not prohibited by law, and if management allows, they can work for the internal, or they can work for the external auditor directly. So, what they can do is, okay, again, if there are judgmental areas, higher risk assessment areas, or areas where their competency or objectivity is not there, we will avoid. But if the area is kind of low risk, okay, or there is not more judgment, we can involve them. And for that, we need to first of all take a written authorization from the authorized representative of the entity. Let's say over here, and this will be those charged with uh, charged with governance or audit committee. They will authorize us, okay, you can use the internal auditors for direct assistance. Direct assistance means that I will guide them what you need to do. Okay, I will provide them what you need to do. I will direct them, supervise them, I will review their work. It will be kind of a extension of the external auditors. They will become the staff, or they will become the part of the external audit team. Okay, I will have a written agreement with the internal auditors on the confidentiality. Okay, I will have a written agreement with the management that they will not intervene in the work of internal auditors, and they will not pressurize or they will not hinder any internal audit work that we are assigning to them in case of direct assistance. Okay, as an external auditor, I will be responsible for the nature, timing, and extent, direction, supervision, and review of the work they will perform. Okay, I need to perform the review procedures, and I need to check whether their work is adequate or not. So kind of an extension, you will get additional resources for your team. Okay, and they will perform the work on your behalf, and you have to review the way the work is being performed by your team. Simple, direct assistance. Clear? Any doubt on this? Okay, if no doubts till now, if no doubts, then let's do one thing. We have a basically questions given at the end of each session. Okay, at the end of each chapter, let's take up a question and then discuss what you will write as an answer. Okay, because that is also we need to understand. So let us take a question. Zero Limited has appointed Mr. Shubh to conduct their internal audit for the new financial year. The audit committee requested Mr. Shubh to perform a detailed analysis of their expense into the previous year and report all risk and underlying gaps. Elucidate the steps internal auditors should take to identify such gaps. So what internal auditor should take as a steps to perform this kind of work? Anyone? What steps internal auditor is required to take to perform this kind of work? Anyone? Simple question. Yes or no? Ratio analysis. Okay. Someone said ratio analysis. Very good, Manish. Absolutely correct. What steps you will perform? Simple. Very good, Manish. Come on, quickly. Pretty easy. Trust me. Pretty easy. Let me give you the answer. If you write the answer for this particular question in a way that you will perform ratio analysis, you will perform sample testing, you will perform, let's say, test of controls on expense, you will undertake fraud risk assessment. Okay. How many of you will write this answer? That you will do ratio analysis, any other also, like any other procedure. If you know, you can tell me, I'll write it also. But how many of you will write this? How many of you will write this? Because this is entirely wrong. Most of the students face this kind of problem in exam. You need to understand what is asked in the question. They're not asking the testing or the kind of test you will perform. What they are asking is simple steps internal auditors should take to identify such gaps. They are asking steps. They are not asking the example of procedures. No, it is not example of procedures. Not illustrative. Illustrative process or procedures of testing. No, these kind of words are not there. Correct? So they are not here. No, these are not specified. They have asked steps. And when I talk about steps, the steps we have already discussed. Steps for the internal audit. Simple. If I go back, these are the steps. 5 steps. Simple. That's it. These are the 5 steps that the internal auditor will perform to identify the gaps. So that's where it becomes important to understand the question what is asked. Rather than answering the question speedily, you need to understand the question what is asked, and then you need to answer the question. Absolutely correct. Steps versus example of procedures. It is asked, specifically provide these steps, and you need to write the steps. The moment you misinterpret the question, you will write the procedures. After the exam, you will come. I have written. It was very easy question, but when you see the most of the students see the marks, they say, "I have written, but I have not received the marks." That's the reason, because you misunderstood the question. You misunderstood the question, and that's where the problem starts. Understanding the question is very important. You can understand the question when you have read the study material, because see, at the end, everything is coming from your study material in exam. Okay, if you are aware about your study material, what is given in what chapter, if you have read, if you have understood the concepts, you will be able to write an exam. Okay, they are asking steps for the internal audit. You have practiced, you will know that when it is steps, what I need to write. That's where reading, practicing along with these lectures becomes very, very important. Clear? Any doubt on this particular question? No? Any doubt on whatever point we have discussed till now? In this particular question, SIA are mentioned or not? In which question? The question that we now discussed. Here we are talking about the 5 steps. You need to specify these 5 steps. You may write in the SIA references in the answer if you remember. If you don't, then you need to just write the steps. So whatever you remember, you can write in the steps. Okay, but basically what you need to do is you should not deviate from what is given. Rather, let's say the third step is gather required information. I may not write that, okay, perform fraud risk assessment. That is different story, different assignment. That is a type of the assignment. So accordingly, whatever you remember, try to remember the things which are there. Okay, but if you do not remember the numbers, then at least write what you remember. So the references of the standards which are there in your study material, you have to remember those. Clear? Any doubt? Is it compulsory to mention essay number? Yes, it is mandatory to mention the essay number or the numbers of standards, like the standards of internal auditing, which are mentioned in your study material in the exam. Yes, it's compulsory. Even for the professional ethics, it is mandatory to mention the clause number, the schedule, okay, the part and the act, everything. Any doubt? Read this. The homework for you guys will be read this chapter, please. If you want to complete the entire subject in a smooth way, after each and every lecture, rather even before the lecture, read that chapter so that you can have the doubt. Okay, but if you are not able to read before the class, at least read after the class, so that whatever we have discussed in the session, you can correlate, understand the study material at the same time. Because today you remember what we discussed in the class. 10 days later, we are discussing something else in the class, and if you read this chapter, you might not be able to correlate. So it's very important that after the session, read. Okay, and then subsequently, gradually, you practice it also. So basically, you need to check for the portal, BOS portal, for the schedule which is given over there, like what will be the next session. But if I just tell you, Just give me a minute. Today is 17th. So 19th August, Wednesday, chapter number 17, due diligence, investigation, and forensic accounting. Please make sure you read that chapter, at least some portion of it. So 19th and 24th, we will be covering chapter number 17. I would request everyone at least read for, half of the chapter before the next session, so that when we are discussing the due diligence or some portion of investigation, you guys are aware that what we are discussing and you can at least ask the questions or doubts. Okay. Yes, that will be uploaded. So notes and everything after the session will be uploaded. Any other doubts? Any other questions? Nope. Okay, then if no other doubts and questions, then thank you guys. Thank you for participating in today's session. I'll see you in the next. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.